6'2".
Right.
Smart kid, at least 3'3" and above.
You're also describing Hurts.
Yeah,
as
tough.
well. I mean,
physical. I mean, offensive line. My defensive line is totally opposite.
What do you mean?
Single mama. Trying to get it. He's on free lunch. I mean, I'm talking about just trying to make it. He trying to rescue mama.
And happy Saturday, and welcome to the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Saturday, March 4th, 2023. We're so happy to have you in with us. Val Atkinson has the week off, and we got a special edition of the deal with Cherelle James. Hey, Cherelle, welcome to the deal.
Hey. So happy to be here.
But Cherelle, in the intro, we always play clips about what we want to talk about. And one of the last clip in the intro, and let's just start there, Deon Sanders. Now, Coach Prime, as he likes to be called, is at the University of Colorado now. He had been at Jackson State. And there was a bunch of hoopla about him being at Jackson State and what he did for HBCU football. He couldn't beat Central or South Carolina State, by the way. But that's a whole nother subject. And we've had the coach from Elizabeth City State on this year as well, talking about how the landscape of football has changed, even for HBCUs. But now Deon's at University of Colorado. And in the clip, he says some stuff that I'm not sure should have been said the way he said. Now, I know that, sometimes we get in a room with our folks and we say things, right? So Deon says that, he's looking for a particular kind of player, in this case, somebody who's hungry. And then he specifically put it down to reduce the free lunch. And okay, funny, haha, whatever. But what made me uncomfortable was 3 white men sitting there cracking up. And a lot of these kids really do think the NFL may be what saves their family. Talk to me about what you think about what Coach Prime said on the Rich Eisen show.
I'm not going to say that there's no truth in what he said, because he's a coach and what he looks for is what he looks for. Plain and simple, right? So if he was telling his truth, then that's his truth. I think there's a way to tell your truth and not diminish others. There's a lot of stereotypes, especially when we talk about African-American children or just African-Americans in general. There's already stereotypes out there in the world, right, about us. And to talk about single parent home and a single parent home that's on free or reduced lunch speaks not only about the student, but now you're talking about the parent as well. Could that be true? It could be true. It definitely could be true. But it just puts down so many different stereotypes. And I know he wasn't talking about one race or the other. It's just the stereotypes that were coming out, of his mouth. And the fact that there was others there, different race, they're probably having in their mind, right, African-American male, single parent home with a mother who's struggling, working all these jobs, waiting for the baby to make it so that she can stop working. And then the laugh that came from that, not a good conversation where we're talking for real. I'm telling you my truth and we're really having a good discussion about it. But now it's a joke. Now it becomes almost a joke. And I don't know. Now I sit there and I only know a little bit of the clip. I can't find before and after. I'm looking for that now, but I have not seen before after. Let me say that. I have not seen the before and after that little small snippet. But the laugh could have been from an uncomfortableness of what he was talking about, right? Or it could have been because they just found it funny. But what it came across as to me is offensive and found funny. And I just wonder if there's a different way that you could have had that same conversation and not been as animated. And we know Deon Sanders, Coach Prime time, even before Coach, right, was prime time, animated and definitely can give us a show. But I don't know what impact that may have had in the long run overall when we talk about the future of athletes, and what that makes them feel like, saying that's me, or that I have a single mom, or I don't have a two-parent family. There's already some stigma that's already there, and then you come and being a coach who should be an example and a leader, you come and kind of define that in a way, broadcasting it widely. Even if that's what you do, you gotta tell all your secrets.
Yeah, you don't have to tell all your secrets, which actually is where I wanted to start today, Cherelle, because this is a special edition of the deal. We got a guest coming up in the second segment. His name is Brentley Wright, and he talks about diversity and inclusion. And right now we are in a quandary in this country because there are some people who are not happy at all that colored folk may run stuff, right? And so in the second segment, I really encourage people to stay around for that, and listen to Brentley Wright. If you also have a chance, there'll be a longer interview with him on Sunday, March 5th on Foxy 107, 104 on Connections at 8 a.m. But if you don't want to get up at 8 a.m., you can always hear the replay on this website, thedealwithedclark.com, and click on the link for Connections, and you'll be able to get the whole interview with Brentley Wright when we talk to him there. But what struck me about Coach Prime is still this notion that we're desperate and it can only have sports as a way to get out, right? I played sports. I was never going to make it in the NFL or as an Olympian in track and field, which I thought, when I was younger, I was maybe I'll end up being the world's greatest triple jumper or whatever. That did not happen. When I played rugby, maybe I played for the U.S. team, did not do that. And all of it turned out to be an experience that you have that you can carry on your life, and you got lifelong friends and so on and so forth, and more of a social thing and not the way to financial freedom. And I think that's what bothered me the most is this notion that that's all colored people can do is look for that golden ticket that can happen through sport in the NFL. So I'll leave it there. So I want to remind you guys that if you're listening to the podcast on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever, this is the deal. Cherelle James is in with us today. If you're watching us on video, you can get us on Anchor and a lot of Spotify. You can get us on YouTube and Facebook. We're everywhere, Cherelle. And so we want you to subscribe and share it with people. And I think you're going to get a lot of the conversation in the second half of the show. But I do want to cover a couple other things, Cherelle. Eli Lilly, who is a pharmaceutical company, decided that they were going to cap insulin at $35, which is something that Joe Biden talked about in his State of the Union speech, where the Medicare has capped at $35. Now Eli Lilly is going to do it. What do you think about what Eli Lilly has done? And clearly they're a company that makes money off of drugs. But talk to me about this $35 cap.
Listen, I am super excited when I heard it. The pharmaceutical industry is just amazing. That's the word I'm going to use today. Amazing. And I don't say that 100% in a good way, right? They do help, and there's a place for the pharmaceutical industry, but the exorbitant amount of money that they charge for things that don't cost that much to produce, and to know that it's to help people, with ailments and to live longer and whatever it is that they're helping with, have better recreation or whatever it may be, to take that and then figure out how to not just profit, but to pretty much segregate is really what they do, right? Segregate who can get in, who can't get it, because of, again, going back to, I just think this follows the line of what we were talking about in the beginning of where do you lie from a monetary standpoint in your life? You know, what is the economic value you currently are holding in the world? Depends on if you can get medicine or not. And what is available to you. And I think that bringing this down, especially knowing that diabetes is very rampant in the African American community, so it hits home for me. Bringing it into a cap where people are choosing: do I eat today, or do I go get my medicine? You know, kids are going without to get medicine that they need, and whatever else it may be. I applaud Eli Lilly, and I'm hoping that more pharmaceutical companies take note and follow suit.
I hope so too, because drugs cost too damn much, and that's the official way to say it. It's too damn much, and it puts strains on families and people, and you have to make a decision about whether or not you're going to buy this medication, or you're going to eat. A lot of decisions you have to make, Cherelle, and I don't like that. The other story I want to talk about is also health related. I got a clip here we're going to play, and then we'll talk about it.
Calling out China, the U.S. ambassador to China tonight demanding the country, quote, be more honest about the origin of COVID-19. This after a new report from the U.S. Department of Energy found the virus likely resulted from a lab leak in Wuhan, where the first cases of the virus appeared. The Chinese government tonight, as usual, is denying the lab leak theory. Our David Culver has a Southfront investigation on what he witnessed when he traveled to what is still ground zero for COVID-19.
Wuhan, China. You know it as the city from which COVID-19 first emerged. But how exactly it started depends on who you ask and who you believe.
We're going to have to push China to be more honest about what happened 3 years ago in Wuhan with the origin of the COVID-19 crisis.
The U.S. Energy Department, just the latest agency to assess with low confidence that the virus likely came from a lab leak. That, according to two sources. It's a claim that infuriates Chinese officials. China's foreign ministry Monday calling on the U.S. to stop smearing China and stop politicizing the issue of the virus origin. Our first of three trips.
Okay, Cherelle. So, guess what? Now people are saying, there may have been a leak of COVID from a lab in Wuhan, which was kind of on the table before. The orange guy, Donald Trump, alluded to it when he was president, but he just didn't have any tact, and he didn't know how to talk about stuff when he would get up to the podium or whatever. He also told us to put bleach in our bodies, which is, we don't even want to go there. But what I'm concerned about, Cherelle, is if it came from China, so if it was from a lab leak, it killed over 1 million American people, not because it was leaked from China. That is the antecedent, right? That happened before. But once it was here and we knew it was here, people fought over masks, Cherelle. People fought over getting vaccinated. People that I know died from COVID. People that I know died from COVID. Some died because they refused to take the vaccine, and some died because they had immunocompromised situations and they died. And then there was a radio host who used to be in the Raleigh-Durham area who I knew pretty well, Phil Valentine, who made his whole shtick off of being as right as you can get. And I knew Phil, and I knew him. I knew that a lot of it was just him running off at the mouth, right? And he got into that right-wing conservative thing. He died, Cherelle, because he kept doubling down on not getting vaccinated, whatever, blah, 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 and being a full-on MAGA supporter. He died. So here's the question for you. Does it matter if it was a lab leak or not?
At this point, I don't think it does. In the sense of, okay, it could, because of the devastation that's happened. It's more so about what are we doing about the devastation, and COVID is still here. So what are we doing about that at this point? does it matter in the sense of maybe protocols or figuring out how we can kind of maybe respond better next time, or, you know, putting in some safe fails? I mean, we're not China, but who knows what we can do to help them out. But maybe in that way, it matters, right? If we're being proactive in some things. But now it's way beyond where did it come from, who did it, and why did it happen. It's about, it's still here. We're in 2023 and that happened in 2020. And people are still wearing masks. People are still getting COVID. People are still dying. And it's leading the way for other things that are coming in as well. I mean, when I think about the emergency department and all the, you know, talking to nurses, and I've got family that works there, and it's like, I'm just tired of COVID and RSV and all these different things are starting to pop up now. Maybe in that way it matters, because maybe we can figure out, okay, how are these other things are happening, things of that. But other than that, it's just a distraction from what do we need to do now?
Yeah, exactly. You know, before we run out of time in this segment, because I really want to get to Brentley Wright. He's patiently waiting to talk to us. One last thing I want to talk about, and I think is extremely important, I think we're going to have a longer discussion about this at some point, is that the Supreme Court heard oral arguments this week on the student loan forgiveness. President Biden promised to forgive up to $20,000 for some people for student loans. And, you know, just from listening to the arguments in the break, you'll hear some of those oral arguments. It doesn't sound like it's going to survive. And what that means is people are going to be back to paying these student loans. And Cherelle, some people pay decades on these loans. What's the upshot of the Supreme Court if they say that President Biden's plan is unconstitutional? What does it mean for, you know, the folks who, you know, are going to have to start paying again?
I think that for the folks that have to start paying again or continue to pay, right, it can be detrimental to, again, we just talked about medicine and choosing between medicine and food. Well, the same thing with student loans. I mean, it's so, just think about having a student loan that's 20 to 34 years old, but even like if you got a student loan in a time where the economy was down when you graduated, like when did you have a chance to actually get a job, and the economy failing and not really picking up? And so being able to pay the student loan when you wanted to, or if you didn't want to, but, you know, being able to pay the student loan kind of became one of those things of, it's not that I don't want to, I can't afford to pay it. I've got other things I need to do. And so that brings some relief to student loan borrowers. I think that also there's a bigger thing that we should be talking about here outside of this. I think this is a start. I don't think it's the end. I think this is a start when we talk about student loans, but there needs to be some other legislation and policies put in place moving forward about student loans and helping people, because you go to school and you get in debt to get an education so you can come out and get a job. Like, that doesn't even make sense. I'm already in debt before I even start. So I'm starting not at ground zero, not with one leg up because now I have a degree. I'm starting below ground zero at negative because I have debt and all these other things. So the impact to credit, just all these kind of things come up. And I know we've got to definitely have a longer conversation about this another day, but it's going to be a bad impact if they're not able to sort this out, and definitely people will be in a bad way.
Yeah, people will be in a bad way. You know what, Cherelle, that's a good time for us to take a break. You know, of course, we didn't talk about anything that was uplifting in this first segment. And I'm not sure we're going to talk about a whole lot that's uplifting in this segment that's coming up with Brentley Wright. However, we need to talk to him. So let's take a break. And when we come back, Brentley Wright will be in with us to talk about diversity and Stay right there. We'll be right back after this.
Well, meanwhile, the U.S. Supreme Court took up 2 cases today challenging President Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. The pause on student loan repayments that started in March of 2020 will be lifted 60 days after the cases are resolved.
If you're talking about this in the abstract, I think most casual observers would say if you're going to give up that much amount of money, if you're going to affect the obligations of that many Americans on a subject that's of great controversy, they would think that's something for Congress to act on.
One of the reasons that we should care about change and growth as leaders is not because our business isn't successful today. It's what could it be if we were better. The diversity movement was something that we had to do. As a marketer, as a business leader, clients started to ask us to think about communicating with a multicultural lens. Certainly diversity, equity, inclusion is the right thing to do, but it also has to be the right thing to do for your business's success. Companies want to be associated with brands and products and people that they're proud to be associated with. So who you are matters more than it ever did before. My wide range of experience as an entrepreneur, as an angel investor, as a quota-carrying technology sales professional, as the leader and CEO of a marketing firm, the founder of the startup, the diversity movement, gives me a point of view of how to bring you relevant examples that you can incorporate into your business. By winning every day, you can create the culture you want in your department, then your team, then your organization.
And welcome back to our second segment of The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. We got a special guest for our second segment today. His name is Brentley Wright, and he does diversity and inclusion. We just wrapped up Black History Month, and I made a command decision, Cherelle. From now on, we're not just going to have Black History Month. We're going to do Black History 12 months a year, 365 days a year, and we're going to continue to have on guests that talk about issues that are important, not only to African Americans, because once we start talking about DEI, you're going to see that it affects everybody. So, Cherelle, do you mind telling us a little bit about Brentley Wright?
Yeah, Brentley Wright is an entrepreneur and a relationship builder, and so happy to have him today. Certified diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner with a proven track record of success when it comes to multicultural business arenas. So Brentley works at TDM, that's the diversity movement, and he leads DEI Navigator, the company's monthly membership service designed exclusively for businesses committed to DEI action and results. Brentley has a background in telecommunications and financial services sales, as well as a host of certifications, professional certifications, and he is a DEI expert, and super excited to have him today to talk to us about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Brentley, welcome to the deal.
Glad to be here. Thanks. Good to meet you, Ed. Cherelle, what's going on?
Well, look, man, just a programming note. Brentley's going to be with us on Connections, also on the radio. So it's a longer discussion. So if you want to catch that, you can also catch that on thedealwithedclark.com. Just click on the link up here where it says Connections, and you'll be able to get the other interview with Brentley. But I wanted him on the deal today because, we do a little bit something different over the deal. We try to keep abreast of current events. And one of the current events we talked about in the first segment, Brentley, was just this move to deny that there's other people in the country. We don't want to talk about Black history. We don't want to talk about colored folk. Everything is woke. And you get these people like DeSantis and Abbott and those folks who, I'm sure if you walked in the room and said, "Hey, I'm Brentley Wright and I do diversity and inclusion," they would not be happy to see you, brother. So talk to me first about this notion of this backlash from people like DeSantis and all those people, and how it makes your job a lot harder in that environment.
Yeah, Ed, they would throw me out the room quickly. Security would be coming to get me out. And I'll be trying to say, hold on. Listen, we all can win here. The challenge is it's just a zero-sum game approach. And, they think that if you bring someone up, then they have to lose, right? If you make someone else win, you have to lose. And I just don't, the interesting thing here is that I am so shocked and surprised that I know that DEI at least hits one family member in their family. I mean, you can't tell me this doesn't touch one person in their family. And to overlook that type of that type of approach and then do the things you're doing, it just makes it so much harder, because you have some people in organizations that say, see, if our state says that we don't have to do it, we won't do it. We can catch backlash. We can have disdain toward DEI. And so we're always trying to have to figure out ways to rebrand DEI, et cetera. And on another note, it just think about just being able to remove the history of an individual. I mean, to erase who we are, to take us out of school education, to remove who we are from it, which is basically American history and history itself. It's just a damaging thing to Black and brown individuals. It's a damaging thing to have created almost 300 laws towards anti laws that go against LGBTQ plus, which is now raising high suicide rates for young LGBTQ teens. And I mean teens who are committing suicide because they can't handle that pressure. They can't go to school. And so they're just doing so much to just exclude, when DEI is about inclusion and equity for all, equality and equity. And that's what King fought for. And that's what all the other civil rights leaders marched for. And we got to continue that fight. We got to continue that fight to say, yeah, we're here. We're not going anywhere. We're going to keep pushing against those laws.
Yeah, Cherelle, you found Brentley for us and brought him in here, and I want to thank you for doing that. But I know we talk a lot, Cherelle, about just how we feel in the environment here. You have Donald Trump running for president again. You have these Marjorie Taylor Greene, who we talked about her a few weeks ago. She had no problem with calling Joe Biden a liar at the State of the Union. You had Proud Boys and all these other groups who were people who are being convicted, for their attempt to overthrow the election. And as you listen to someone like Brentley Wright in the job that he does, I know that raises some questions for you. So as we get browner, what do you think is going to happen to people like Brentley? Because they're already trying to get rid of his discipline. Have you thought about that, Cherelle?
Yeah, definitely when we think about getting browner, I think that history tells us that it invokes some type of fear in others, right? In certain people, a lot of the people that you just named. For what reason? Brentley talked about just because one group raises up doesn't mean another group is lost or has to leave. There's room for everyone. And I think that sometimes, my mom taught me to meet everyone at the human level first. And you can always find commonality. But we are built on, the country is built on, the difference of color, the difference of not just color, but gender, that we're built upon that. And we got to remember that, right? That we're built upon that. And so as we get browner, and our other brown brothers and sisters, come up alongside of us, I think one, that has to happen because there's division there. And so there needs to be some unity in that. But number two, I think that the conversations have to happen, right? And I think that's what we're doing here and what's happening with Brentley and what he does. There's always going to be another side, an opposite side. There's always going to be an opposing side to things. And it's who's going to be the loudest, who can unify the best and have that strength behind them, and then who can be loudest with their message after that. And I don't mean just to be loud to shout it, but I mean to plant it, to plant the seeds, to water those seeds, to grow those seeds, and to move it forward. And I think that's the only way, as we continue to see this world become browner, and the U.S. to become browner, that we have a chance, or we may be back. You know, history has a history of repeating cycles. And we've seen what's happened before when people felt threatened, you know, by brown and Black people. And we just have to be able to find those allies on the other side, number one. And two, there needs to be a plan and unity.
Yeah. I want to remind you, if you're listening to the podcast, this is The Deal with Ed Clark. If you're watching us on any of the platforms, YouTube, Facebook, whatever. But you can also subscribe on any of the podcasting platforms, Anchor, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, wherever you get your fine podcast. That's where we want you to go. And we're lucky that I was able to kidnap Brentley Wright to do a segment with us tonight. So whenever you're watching this, we appreciate you doing that, and ask other people to subscribe and become participants in The Deal with Ed Clark and Cherelle James, and sometimes Val Atkinson, and the whole cast of characters that come through. Well, Brentley, you know, what I think is important about your job is that, again, America is a weird experiment that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. I've been to a lot of countries around the world, and you go there and everybody looks the same, right? For the most part. I mean, you can go to England and France, and there's a fair number of Black people, but not like in America. America is weird. You got people from everywhere. We all came on boats. There's only a few people who were here that, you know, before all of us came. When you're doing diversity and inclusion, do you ever think about the fact that this is a weird experiment? America is something different altogether, that you're trying to get people to act nice to each other, essentially, who don't really want to do that or haven't shown a propensity to do that. Doesn't that make your job a lot harder?
Yeah, it does, because, you know, what I had to think about is how homogeneous we are. Right. So Deborah Plummer wrote a book called Dr. Deborah Plummer, Racing Across Racial Lines. And typically it really is about the reason you can't be empathetic towards one another or have great relational intelligence is because you're not at the dinner table with one another. And until that changes, that's her thesis in the whole book, basically, is until what you do after 5 o'clock changes, then the workplace really doesn't change. The church place really doesn't change, because you're staying in your own homogenous bubble. Right. And so in the workplace is different. The power of the workplace is there are so many different plights. Frances Winter told us this in her book, We Can't Talk About That at Work. Right. She talked about the fact that there are so many plights. There's Black plight. There's LGBTQ plus plight. There's the Muslim plight. There's the Latina plight. There is the sexual orientation plight, the transgender plight. When you're thinking about all these different plights, and I just added a layer to what she said, which I kind of do in my instructions and leadership toward these organizations, is when you have these different plights in the workplace, what you see is one plight is trying to be louder than the other. Right. And so we're all screaming to be heard inside of these 4 walls. And so the interesting thing is to say, okay, how can we be an organization that says we hear all of the plights and the screaming, and our job is to level it out, right? So where we're celebrating the diversity in our organization, we're celebrating the inclusive practices of our organization, and we're celebrating and also instituting fair advancement and equitable practices for every person in this organization that will decide to take this job serious and move forward. Like, we're celebrating that. And that's the piece that you find weird. You find that weird, man, because it's like, what is the saying? Proximity breeds empathy, but distance breeds suspicion. So the organization can do so much, only so much. Ultimately, we still have to live in proximity with one another. We still have to come to work. I am with folks at work more than I am with my own family. So how do you create a culture to where you're not just robots and just mechanical and just to the job? We've been having this for a long time. So some of it is you need to get coffee with someone of a different hue, someone of a different person group, and you need to enjoy that coffee and learning their story. That's the power of diversity, being embraced in your own personal life. And that's something that the organization doesn't even have control over. Like, that's what we can do. And I always talk about inside the four walls versus outside the four walls. And outside those four walls, you got all kind of things, and the world is loud, and the secular places are loud, and there's so much injustice taking place. The power of the workplace says what is going on outside does not and will not happen on the inside. There will not be discrimination here, even though it is prevalent and rising externally. We are going to be a organization that gets this done the right way. So it is weird at times, because you're just like, I don't it's like multi-generational leading, like leading the generations. And some folks who are old enough to be my grandfather have a distorted view and perspective. And then those that are older than me, maybe 10 years older than me, are having such a hard time. How do you help leaders in the organization who of a Christian faith lead their team, and a few members on their team are gay or lesbian, and their moral judgment in the workplace is getting in the way of them leading them properly? Well, you face a legal risk now. And so you have to talk with and coach these leaders. And it's just a weird dynamic of really just leading people. And some of it is common sense. Like, you just can't do that. You just can't say that. You can't really show up that way. And so it's just a fact that's weird. And I'll say this too. The weird piece of it is I just did a speech at Builders Mutual Insurance, and I talked about how there's a difference between your authentic self and bringing your full self to work. Your authentic self, be you. We need you. We need you to come on in. We need you to get right. We want you to be included. Like, we need you. Be you. No one else, be you. But if you bring your authentic self to work, then you're implying that maturity needs to take place. Like, every part of you is not mature. There needs to be some coaching, developing. We got to coach you to greatness. We got to make sure some maturation processes are happening, and you got to be okay with that. And we need you to kind of branch out, expand out, and meet new people and do things that just are not, in your everyday routine. And so it's weird, man. All of these different dynamics that, juggling that dynamic within the workplace, the loud noise on the outside of the workplace that are beating on the walls, trying to get in and crumble the walls down. As I would say, in my approach, the Jericho walls, they're just marching around the building, trying to dismantle these walls, man. So, but even though it's weird, it's tough work, but it's worth fighting for.
Yeah, it is worth fighting for. If you're catching the podcast and you're hearing that voice, that's Brentley Wright. He's a diversity and inclusion expert. Cherelle James is in with us this week on the deal. Before we run out of time in this segment, Brentley, one of the things that and the reason why I wanted you on is because I have a fear that Dr. King talked about something called dangerous optimism, right? He said there'd be a time where you'd be able to go into the restaurant and eat and think that you have arrived and forgotten about what you need to do to fight, where the fight really is, because it was during the time when he was changing his perception of what he needed to fight for, where he took the Poor People's Campaign and they were planning on being in DC, and he talked specifically to Johnson about the Vietnam War. And he was like, why are all the people going to fight in Vietnam? A lot of them are brown and black, and we still don't have equity here.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But he warned black folks against becoming dangerously optimistic that you don't have to fight anymore because you can now sit at the lunch counter. As a diversity and inclusion person, I'm pretty sure you hear from people who say, well, you got the job, you make the money, you guys live in neighborhoods, you're not, not all of you are segregated, things are much better than they used to be. So what are we worried about?
Yeah.
What is your comeback to that? What is the rationale for needing diversity and inclusion when I turn on my TV and essentially American culture around the world is black folk, right?
Right.
I mean, I've been to a lot of countries and everybody they know is black. They know Ron, they know Rihanna, they they know Beyonce, they know Jay-Z. I was in Sweden, of all places, and the dudes were doing lowrider cars in a little town in northern Sweden playing Snoop Dogg.
Culture.
So they think that's American culture, but Americans, not just black Americans, but all the other Americans that we've talked about, LGBTQ, women or whatever, always feel disconnected here, and white men still do a lot of stuff. So explain that for me, Brentley.
Yeah. Like that's powerful because look, you need a DEI program in your workplace because you need to be thinking about not an individual, but a people group. Right. So one of the things I talked about at that Builders Mutual speech was finding your purpose, but the underpinning word to purpose is really burden. See, what Kingdom had was a burden. I talked about how civil rights was a burden and it was its highest ethical movement. And I talked about 1966, Operation Breadbasket. That was a burden because housing, education, economics, healthcare were the four pillars that blacks were getting disparities and being removed from even moving forward. So those are your four horsemen for our community. So to sit and think about it just from an individualized way, my charge to them was the reason you don't have your burden yet is because when you look out in the world, you're not close to the voiceless, the underrepresented, or the marginalized. So when you're not close, and I hear somebody talking about we've made it, if you want to talk about in a sense, what time or what better time to live in America? Yeah, right now, 2023 is the best time to be living in America. I don't want to go back, right? I can't go back, right? It's the best time, but it is also not the ultimate complete time. There is so much work to be done, especially in urban America, where gentrification is happening all around us, where kids are not getting even like Wi-Fi for their education. You talk about healthcare, where the states now are demanding diversity plans for their clinical trials. It's because we are not getting a piece of the pie collectively. And what happens is if we get to 2040 and we become the majority, I like what Roland Martin says, we could end up like South Africa, right? A fully black established folk with no power, no presence, no influence, no money. So his fight right now is to say, okay, if that's the case, we better start preparing. We should not get to 2040 talking about economics as a group. We should not get to 2040 talking about getting a seat at the table. We should not be talking about pulling our folk up. If that's the case, and we get to 2040 still talking about that, we have ultimately lost. So I can't think about a person that's individual just because you live in your nice house and you good. I ain't thinking about you. I need to know who you fighting for. I want to know who you're fighting for. Who have you led up? Who have you brought up in that organization? Who are you training? I need to know what's your issue that you're fighting. And DEI does that. Gives you a burden.
You know, Brentley, as you talk about then, you talk about what are you fighting for? It reminds me of a question that I ask a lot, you know, as I'm on different podcasts and facilitating and different things. And that is, are you fighting for or from victory? Are you fighting for or from victory? And it really is a question that lets you know where that person is, right? So a person who is fighting for victory is the reason why we need DEI. Yes. Right, that we need to be in the fight, because the person who's fighting from victory, or have arrived in some sense of the word, then you need to be fighting for the person who's fighting for victory, because they have not gotten there yet. And just because you're there doesn't mean that there's not others that need to come across, because all of us are on the shoulders of ancestors that have come before us, right? That paved the way. We talk about Dr. Martin Luther King, and all of those that were with him, all of those before him that were in the fight. And with that being said, well, we wouldn't be where we are. That's why 2023 is a great year to be alive, right? But there's still more to do for those who are coming behind us. We may or may not make it to 2040, you know, just depending on what our life has planned for us. But to know that, okay, Dr. King didn't make it to 2023, but guess what's here based on what he had a dream about and what the seeds that he planted and what happened. And I think that we have to look forward in that way. So I like the aspect of we cannot fail in sitting and pontificating and not having a plan of action.
Absolutely.
So many times we march and we do certain things, but there's no plan of action to it. And so it's just that, right? I'm not saying that it doesn't have its place. So don't be confused. I'm not saying it doesn't have its place, but it's not this or that. It's all of that has to happen, right? We have to have someone in the boardroom fighting. We need someone in Congress fighting. We need someone on the street fighting. And fighting, I'm not talking about putting your dukes up and fighting people, but being that advocate that needs to be. We need it in all levels, in all aspects. And so no matter where you arrive to, whether you got that job or you arrived at somewhere bigger or better, then that's a point to get in the door to be an advocate for the bigger and greater good. And so this conversation, boy, you can see it riles me up, because it really hits at the heart for me, because we can't be a society that's just about me. That's what we've become so often, is that drive in to the garage society, right? That is, I drive in and drive out, and it's all about just what I have. And I think that's why we see what we see today.
Yeah.
You know, Cherelle, that you said a mouthful. This is a special edition of The Deal. Our guest this week is Brentley Wright. Normally, Val Atkinson is here, and we're talking politics and all current events and stuff. But from time to time, we like to have a long form conversation with a guest. And this week it happens to be Brentley Wright. If you go back and look at some of our other specials, Brentley, we did one back when there was a crisis with baby formula. You go, so why was there such a thing with baby formula? And one of the things that I learned in that special, and I encourage people to go back and listen to it, baby formula was actually a ploy to get Black folks to buy pet evaporated milk. The company in North Carolina found a Black family that had 4 kids, and they used them in their advertisement, and they went to Black communities and say, you should not breastfeed. You need to use pet milk with a little bit of sugar and some water, and that's better for your baby than breast milk. And it became, the formula industry became a whole thing off of a Black family from North Carolina. And then now when there was supposedly a shortage of formula, they were not encouraging Black women to breastfeed. They were just saying there's a shortage of breast milk.
Mm.
Now, the reason why I bring that story up, Brittany, not only because I want people to go back and listen to that episode, but it brings in mind to me that the disparity between how people are treated, right? In healthcare, in getting a job, in getting a loan. We talked about gentrification, how they go in and take away neighborhoods. We had Kurt Smith on our sister show Connections last week, and Professor Smith from NC State talked about Black people losing their land, yada, yada. We can go down a long laundry list of things that we need to correct for. And so, I mean, we could talk about reparations. We could talk about a lot of other things. But to me, it seems to me that if you can meet people at their jobs, in boardrooms, make some change there, you can make much more substantial progress than jousting at windmills, right? We all read Don Quixote, right? Or like we talked about before, having individual protests. A lot of people know that I'm friends with George Floyd's family, and they've been on this program. They've been on our other program, and they talk about the same thing. They say, we appreciate everybody who got out in the street and protested or whatever, but we got to do this multi-pronged or whatever. So this is a long way around to how we're going to wrap up this segment, Brentley. What do you hope to accomplish in the diversity and inclusion field in the short term that can make some of that progress real to people, right?
Yeah.
And to justify, you going out and speaking. So in the short term, what can you do? Because Black folks still getting killed. I just said George Floyd's name, right?
Yep.
Departments need to do better. But in the long term, for when that 2040 date comes around. So talk to me about those two things, the short term and the long.
Yeah, and part of to go back to what you were saying on the formula piece, these companies understand our buying power. Like, they have researchers that understand, okay, LGBTQ plus has a $3.7 trillion buying power globally, 1.8 or something like that nationally. Black folks, another 1.67, something like that. So, which means that they understand marketing. And through marketing, they overpromise us, right? The Gucci's, the Louis Vuittons, even foolish marketing like we just talked about with the baby formula, the pet formula, right? And what we do is we get it ingrained in our head because of these rings or pings in us from a marketing perspective, and then we go out and we try it. We become, test case subjects, etc. So in the short term, my job and what I'm doing is moving towards and helping these companies understand inclusive marketing practices. That if you learn how to talk with one another, talk to one another, market to one another, each people group correctly and accurately, you could stop disparities. That's an actual win because we have marketing organizations that we're actually coaching, developing, and putting DEI initiatives to. That's an actual, real short-term win. My long-term win is I have to keep fighting for equity, not equality, but equity for my folks, my people, and everyone else. I love what Cornel West said. I love everybody, but I start on my side of the tracks first. I have to start on my side of the tracks. So the moment that I understand how to turn, for example, I work for the diversity movement. The CEO is a Black man. The other co-founders are Black, with the exception of one white co-founder who was excellent, by the way. A very diverse team. Brought me into the organization, has me up under his wing. He's a 30-year Forbes 1000 proven leader, 4 businesses, 4 successful exits, multi-millionaire, doing this business, looking to probably do another one when he exits, coaching me for C-suite. Do you think I'm not passing that down? That's what I can do in the short term and long term. Be the CEO of my life and help others get to where they need to be. And Steve Harvey said it best. The best thing you can do for poor people is not to be one. And that is so true, because we all can't be in the same space. Somebody's got to fight. Somebody's got to get out there after it. So I'm scouring every podcast I can get on to talk about this. Whatever the Lord drops in my lap, I'm going to talk about it. From a church perspective, I'm going to preach about it. I'm going to design programs for it. I'm looking at my neighborhood and zip codes. I'm looking at anthropological studies. I'm going hard because my sons, their lives depend on, I cannot put them in the seas of DeSantis' hands and Trump's hands and any other person that thinks that we are not important, that thinks that our history is not valuable. And that's what I'm going. So I'm going spiritual first and I'm going natural later. But I am working hard in the short term and long term for the fight of equity. I need folks coming up, and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to hustle.
But man, you gave me chills seeing when you talked about your sons, because I got sons too and daughters. And then I'm also a senior citizen and elderly and heading towards the end of my work life. And I think a lot about, what can I do in the short term and long term? I've divided my life and the way I approach my day like that. I want to make an impact to every time I'm able to meet some young person who's not, in the majority. They don't have to be Black. They can be Asian. They can be whoever. I try to invest some time in them and explain to them what they need to do to advance themselves and put themselves in a better position. And in the long term, I do this. I do connections. I do the deal. I write. I'm constantly out there trying to talk about these issues because I think they're important. Cherelle, we got a lot more to talk about, and we'll have more of these special editions of the deal from time to time. But I want to thank Brentley Wright for joining us. Anything else you need to tell us, Cherelle, this week? I mean, what do we need to be thinking about?
I do. And as we're wrapping up Brentley and thinking, it took me back to something that you both have been a part of, and it was an initiative that I had, and I think it fits perfectly right here, because if you want to learn more about Brentley's story and more about Ed Clark's story and listen to some other African-American men, it's called The Voices of a Black Man, and it's the voicesofablackman.com. It is a place where, it sparked with after George Floyd, of what is my part, because my part wasn't marching, right? My part was, let's have some conversations and let's look at people for who they are and not for what you see first when you see them. And so if I leave anything, it is that what I said earlier, meet each one at the human level first. You always say do good for someone. And in order to do that, you got to meet them at the human level first, and then find commonality and then move forward. And I think that's definitely something that, one, you are enough right where you are, but that means that everyone else you meet is enough right where they are as well.
Yeah. So Brentley, this is your first time on the deal. We got a rule here. First, you got to tell us where we can find all your information and where you're going to be coming up.
Yeah, check me out at my website, personal site, brentley-wright.com. So that's Brentley like Bentley, but with an R. So BrentleyWright.com. It'll take you to my personal stuff. You'll get all my social handles. It even take you to my work website as well with that bio. And if you need to reach out to me, you can reach out to me there. So that's where you can find me.
And the other thing that you have to do is you have to tell us something we need to think about for the week coming up, something you're going to do or something you want somebody to do, read a book or whatever. You give us whatever you want that you think somebody will help somebody in the week coming up.
Yeah, I think that's powerful, because I'm always thinking. And so one, you need to pray that God gives you an opportunity to meet someone who needs your help. You need to pray for that opportunity for God to give you that person, cross paths with that individual. Secondly, you need to be thinking about how you're going to improve your life to the next step. And what does that step look like? How to turn a passion into a deliverable. So pray that God will send you somebody to meet that needs your help. You're the answer. You're the answer to their prayer. And so whoever's been praying, pray to God that they run into you and be looking for that opportunity. In a second, improve your life through a new deliverable. I don't care if it's about losing 3 pounds over the next 2 weeks. Get it done. If it's eating different, if it's whatever, reading a new book, which I think we all should be reading 24/7. But however, whatever the new improvement for your life, take that.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's powerful too. Look, folks, if you get a chance, programming note, catch Brentley Wright on Connections on Foxy 107, 104 on Sunday, March the 5th at 8 a.m. If you don't catch it, then we always rebroadcast it starting on Monday after the show. So you can go to the website, thedealwithedclark.com, click on the link for Connections, and you'll get all the information about Brentley, how to get in touch with him. You also see the full episode from Connections. Cherelle, I think we're out of time. So I need for people to go out and do something good for somebody today. And then we'll be back with a regular edition of The Deal next Saturday. Val Atkinson will be back in. We'll be chopping it up, talking about politics. I'm sure somebody will do something crazy. So we'll have plenty to talk about. So in the meantime, we'll see you next week. Bye.